I'm Will Lombardi, and I'm interviewing Jane Braxton Little today. Jane is a local science writer and has been living in Plumas County for
40 plus years.
40 plus years.
Actually, 50.
For a little while.
50.
50 years.
I came for a summer that has never ended.
Yeah, I love it. That's the best. There's a lot of stories like that, I think, in Plumas County, right?
Yeah.
I came to go to FRC and thought it was a year or two, and I've been here for over 30 now. So my first question is this basic education, background, etc. question. I've had the opportunity to speak to different visual artists recently on behalf of Plumas Arts, but you're the first writer I've gotten to speak to.
Yay.
So I'm excited to hear about your background and what you're doing.
So I have no background in journalism. I'll just start with that. I have never taken a journalism class. I'm not proud of that. There's a lot I would have liked to have learned, but I fell into journalism. I grew up on the East Coast, northwest of Philadelphia.
All right.
Well, I was born in California at Stanford, but family moved back. Then I went to college in Indiana, a liberal arts college called Earlham College. And when I was there, I had the opportunity to go to Japan in the very first organized exchange. It wasn't an exchange, it was a one-way program. But the very first American students to go to Waseda University in the Kokusaibu, the international division. That really, it changed my life.
So this was a formative moment for you?
It was a formative 6 months. Yeah, I lived on a farm with a family on a farm for a month, and then mostly I was in Tokyo and went by train every day into classes at the university, Waseda University.
What were you studying?
Japanese geography, actually Asian geography, a lot of language, some literature, Japanese history, and those classes were all in English because it was the beginning of an international program at Waseda.
So this is, I think, what fascinates me is I introduced you as a writer, and in particular a science writer, and you open with, I haven't taken any journalism classes. I'm thinking of genre, and I know what you do as journalism, but I think of a journalist as meeting deadlines at a newspaper or something to that effect. That being said, what you've just described is a background of cultural exchange, largely in history, geography, and literature. Yet your profession, your trade, is writing. So I wonder if you could speak to the writer's oeuvre, where you aren't just a writer, you didn't just major in English, but it was this larger scope, this larger worldview. What was your major?
It was English. English lit, English literature, so you do a ton of writing for that. And I had kind of a mind, when I came back from Japan for my senior year, junior and senior year, I was interested in exploring Japanese literature, and I had enough language at that point that I could do that. So I had kind of an unofficial minor in Japanese literature, but as an English major, actually as any liberal arts major, you just do a ton of writing. So my writing was all academic, and I just to finish up the sequence of before I came here, I went back to Japan after I graduated and lived for 2 years and taught English. And that's when I traveled around Japan so much. I returned by hitchhiking through Asia and Europe and got back to the East Coast
That's a long way home.
And that's another story probably.
Yeah.
But when I returned, I went right to graduate school at Harvard and studied Japanese cultural history. And once again, a ton more writing. But I have always liked to write. And
well, may I ask you then, you had the official exchange. You went back to Ohio.
No.
Or Indiana, excuse me.
Right, for college.
To
right.
finish college.
Yeah.
Then you went back to Japan and worked as a teacher.
Yeah.
And then hitchhiked Asia to Europe, back home to grad school.
Yeah.
I love this because this is the writing fantasy, isn't it?
Yeah.
The footloose experiential life.
Yeah.
And, you know, depending on how far you push that, grad school doesn't play into it. Finishing your degree doesn't play into it. But there is a structure or a mindset that says experience is what I need.
Experience.
And this gives voice to writing?
I most definitely. It also gives you an excellent sense of world geography. I think more than anything, that kind of travel evokes curiosity, and that is the key.
So it's not simply experience, it's curiosity. Curiosity is the key. So tell me this then, were you keeping a journal during this period?
Yes, I've kept journals since, I don't know, way back. I would have been better off if I'd been a little less poetic.
Yeah.
And a little more down to earth.
Poetry's nice.
Poetry's nice.
Jane.
It doesn't remind you where you were necessarily if you're trying to reconstruct something. But yeah.
You learned somewhere along the line that being an academic was not what you wanted to be?
No, I not exactly. At a certain point, John and I had agreed that we would switch off in the winter, and he would stay home with the kids because his job was seasonal by intention. He did not want to work year-round, and I would teach full-time.
Right.
And a job at the Indian Valley Record opened, and I took it for the winter. And in the spring, I went to my editor, Terry Shores, and said, okay, I'm going to quit for the summer and then come back in the fall. And he said, oh, no, you're not.
And it just...
So by then I was kind of hooked. I realized that it was fun. It was a way to get to know this community, and I could explore things that interested me.
And it satisfies your curiosity.
Increasingly, I was able to cover the beats that really interested me. I have to say Feather Pub was very good to me. I learned a lot about newspaper writing, about that style of writing, and they gave me so much flexibility and allowed me to develop my voice.
Yeah.
I've always been grateful.
Yeah.
Always.
I love that. This is a wonderful sort of setup. We understand, I think, who you are, where you've been, what's shaped you. And I wonder if I can direct us more precisely towards craft.
Right.
You've led us to this place where you were a weekly beat writer in our area, Indian Valley and beyond.
Well, Indian Valley, then I eventually was the court reporter. I covered the Board of Supervisors, the Planning Commission, which I loved.
Yeah.
And that is how I cut my teeth on the basics of land use planning. The spotted owl controversy was raging.
Yeah,
I covered all that. And by then I was freelancing too. I was freelancing and working for the Sacramento Bee.
So you could see a
selling the
future
magazines.
then.
Yeah.
You could
Oh,
see
yeah.
a future
Yeah.
in newspaper reporting and freelancing.
And I could see a future doing those things and being based right here in Plumas County, which all of the essentials of environmental controversy have been right here.
Was it this subject matter that turned your attention from what it had been, which sounds to me more geography and culture, towards this specific environmental subject?
Well, all of the political controversies in Plumas County, most of the political controversies in Plumas County have to do with natural resources.
Yeah.
They have to do with trees, forest or timber, however you want to characterize it. They have to do with rivers, dammed rivers, or fish in rivers, or
And
diverting
now
rivers.
OHV.
They have to do with air
Yeah.
quality. And so all of the essentials were controversial issues in Plumas County that I covered in a he said, she said way, you know, that journalism thing where,
Yeah.
you know, you juxtapose everything. And what I needed and wanted to get away from was that sort of slavish balance. Because when you do your diligence as a reporter and you go out and you talk to everyone you can think of on a subject, and I always over-research. You read what you can, you go online, you do all that stuff, and you gather all this information and bring it back. It's your reporting that directs the story, that tells you what the story is. What I began working for after I left Feather Publishing was to allow myself a stronger and stronger voice. I think you don't read much that's he said, she said, neutral, that changes your life.
Mm-hmm. Talk to me about how research fits into your writing process.
Every story starts with an idea, and the idea can come from anywhere. It can be you hear somebody talking about something in the grocery store, or you read something online. My first investigative story came from a CHP report. Some dude was drunk and wrecked his truck in a tributary of the Feather River. I read the CHP report, and it said that he was carrying depleted uranium, and he was taking it to Sierra Army Depot in Herlong. And I thought,
what?
Why the hell is somebody taking depleted uranium to Sierra Army Depot? So I dug in, I started researching it, and that resulted in the first expose of Sierra Army Depot as a nuclear weapons storage facility.
You start with an idea, you do some field work before you read the books?
No, not necessarily. I like to read, this is a big debate among journalists. Do you learn everything you can about the place you're going to, or do you allow serendipity?
Yeah.
That is a big debate.
Yeah.
And I try to learn enough to not be an idiot when I get there, but I'm big on serendipity.
Leave space
I'm big on letting the place and the people and whatever is happening there initiate the story, guide the story.
I get it,
Yeah.
okay.
And the way I start writing is just to pick the piece that I have the most passion for. What is the most intriguing thing? What is it that I think about at night when I'm trying to go to sleep that I have to start with that one. I have no idea where it's going to fit, no idea whether it'll even stay, but I start writing that piece. And then I write another piece that really intrigues me. And pretty soon I have all of these little quilt blocks, I call them.
Yeah.
I have no idea how they fit together. I don't even know if they fit together. But I have all these little pieces. And gradually, you know, I begin to see a pattern, and the pattern becomes the story.
So you as a writer then strive to simply get words on the page.
I do.
And then you find the structure.
Yeah, and I always, now this is mixing the metaphors, but I always think I'm better at the flesh than the bones, because the bones are the structure. And I struggle to find the structure amid all these colorful quilt blocks that I have.
You're here alone most days, I assume, with your brain and your words and your field notes and your research, and your task is to put it together. I don't know if I'm asking for advice for other writers, but can you describe that for me? Is it an agony? Is it an ecstasy? Is it just going to the gym and putting in the time? You know what I mean? What?
Well, it's all of that. I mean, it's awful. There are awful moments. There are dark moments when you, for one thing, by now I have a firm deadline, I have a firm assignment, and I have money riding on it, and that kind of pressure cuts both ways. I mean, it is pressure, and you can panic under that pressure, but at some point, I just say, you just have to do this.
Yeah.
You just have to figure out how the hell you're going to do this, and you just have to do it. And that is the words on a page. The ecstasy part comes when you get in a zone. And when you get in the zone, waste management can be coming up the steps, people can be coming in and out of this office, and I am someplace else writing. And that is ecstatic. When you get that, it's what keeps you writing. It's what keeps you going.
So tell me this though, because there's times when I'm grinding it out.
Yeah.
I'm just grinding it out. And then there's times when that light shines on me and I'm where that place you just described. I can't say that the writing I produce when I'm in the zone is always more inspired or even ever more inspired than when I'm just grinding it out. You need that emotional boost. But sometimes it's cockamamie.
It is, yeah. That's absolutely the word. Well, let me go back to the quilt block metaphor, because it's when I get it's once you have all these things, these little blocks, and really they're like maybe a page, maybe a paragraph, it doesn't matter. But when you realize that you have to write transitions, that is kind of going to the gym kind of work, as you described it. But that is just how do these things connect? And okay, really, these two things don't connect, but that one over there fits perfectly right here. And that changed the story because I just moved that quilt block off to the scrap pile for now.
Yeah.
I actually do this really weird thing where when I move a block or a paragraph out, I literally have at the end of the story a scrap pile, and I keep them.
Yeah.
Because sometimes they come back. Yeah. There's another place for them.
I feel strongly about that. I tell my students, you have to get words on the page. You can work with words, but also there aren't wasted words. Doesn't mean we're going to use them all. But that thing that you cut, it sounds like, in your case, the thing that you move remains as an artifact that is still available for later drafts, because as things evolve, it may have a space again. Is that what you're...
That's exactly it. And when I talk about writing to people, I say, don't worry about the lead sentence. Don't worry about starting at the beginning. Yeah. But I find that I have to get something down. It may change. It may, well, almost certainly will change. Yeah. But that's the structure that I need to bring the other pieces in. And the other pieces come in, in a pell-mell kind of way. But the other thing that I would say is it's really important to give yourself time and space. There is nothing like a weekend between a Friday struggle and then looking at your work again on a Monday.
You're right.
And sometimes just a walk around the neighborhood, you know, I can't wait to get back because suddenly I know what I'm doing and I know where that piece goes and I know what the transition is. And I start running because I have to get it down before I forget it.
I understand that feeling. It's like, oh, I need a walk to clear my head. And of course, the idea comes when you're at the farthest away.
Right, and you have to charge back.
I can tell you from my office downtown that I do laps of the courthouse so that I'm never too far. You've been doing this now. You've been working as a freelance writer for at least 30 years.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk to me about your evolution and perhaps in the context of your projects? Can you maybe discuss your evolution and give us a few milestones?
The transition from writing for newspapers to magazines is huge. And earlier I referenced developing a voice, and that newspapers, most newspaper writing, you want to suppress your voice. And magazine writing, you want to express your voice. So that was a transition. I mean, I think I hid behind...
he said, she said.
Exactly. I hid behind that so that I wouldn't have to have a voice, you know, and gradually I learned to speak with my own voice. I had early success with Audubon magazine, and the first real breakthrough story there was a story about a guy named Gordon Hempton, who is interested in the soundscape, and he's interested in protecting the soundscape. And he developed this concept called 1 square inch of silence, which is happening practically nowhere on the planet. That's the sad part of it. But I went to his home base is Olympic National Park. So I followed him around in Olympic National Park for a couple of days, and watched him record sound. We recorded the sound of oceans, we recorded a stream, we recorded running moose. So I was as close as you are to me from a moose that had no interest in me. He was dead set on the harem that was in front of him. So Gordon's over here, you know, with his big microphones. That story was about something that was environmentally and politically relevant. Gave me a chance to describe that, to describe Olympic National Park and some of the wonderful things there. That was and this was a high-profile magazine, and it ran in print and it ran well. So that was a kind of breakthrough for me, I'd say.
So you've gone from birds to what? Birds, sound,
place.
Anything that has to do with place, and I know you're writing about fire now.
Oh, okay. So yeah, well, that's a pretty obvious thing to write about when you're based in Plymouth County, right? That was actually an Audubon story too, where I was interested in writing about the incredible benefits that come from natural fire, and the way fire releases nutrients and attracts species that are dependent on fire. So that was a story about birds, mostly the blackback woodpecker. And I went with Ryan Burnett, who many people know in Plymouth County as a wonderful ornithologist with Point Blue. I traipsed around both the Chips fire, and then we went down to the Rim fire a year after it had burned. And it was at the time one of the largest and most destructive fires in terms of ecosystems. So that story was all about, I think the title was something like, Can We Learn to Live with the Heat of Fire, or something like that. But that was the beginning of my thinking about fire as an ecological force and not just a destructive force. And that's stayed with me.
And that's, I mean, the last few things I've seen of yours have been in that vein still.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I love this. What did we miss? What do you want to tell us about? Because I know Chernobyl, I mean, this is a global story that you cover.
Yeah. Yeah, I've written about 6 stories about Chernobyl and Fukushima, 6 or 7. Some of them were with a partner, and that is a wonderful experience, is to work with somebody that you trust and that you fit with. Yeah, covering those nuclear disasters, that's another sort of minor theme of mine. And just last week I interviewed a survivor of Hiroshima.
Oh, boy.
And I don't know what I'm going to do with that. That's bringing the pieces back.
How old is that person?
I should know, late 80s.
This has been wonderful, Jane.
Yeah, for me too.
I've really enjoyed this. Thanks a bunch.
Thank you, Will. I enjoyed it.
Cheers.
Thank you very much.